It is an honor for me to be here with you today to participate in the work of the prestigious Pontifical Academy of Sciences. And I shall be addressing you in my capacity as president of AMAD. So my presentation will be based on very real facts and some quite sad truths that probably hinder social and cultural integration. But with our experience on the ground, we have found a few tools, as imperfect as they are, to try to implement this integration. AMAD is an association dedicated to protecting children around the world. It was founded in 1963, years in fact before the Convention on the Rights of Child. AMAD is based on a vision, the vision of a world where every child, whatever his social, religious, or cultural origins are, would have the capacity to live in dignity and security, his fundamental rights fully respected. The vision of a world where every child would have the opportunity to fulfill his potential. I currently chair this association, which is based in the Principality of Monaco and has an international network of partners and national branches. We are strongly committed in favor of child protection and empowerment all around the world. We contribute to implement these commitments through the following missions: to protect the most vulnerable children from violence, exploitation, and abuse, to promote the empowerment of children by improving access to education and health, to accompany change through awareness. Among the different issues which affect children and with which AMAD is actively involved, I wanted to take this opportunity I have been given to discuss with you the specific situation of children who are part of armed groups, so-called child soldiers. And in this precise case, social and cultural integration goes through reconstruction. Last September, I had cause to visit the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo in order to observe the actions implemented by AMAD on site. There I was confronted with the harsh reality of the daily violation of children's rights. They are the first victims of poverty and indiscriminate exploitation of natural resources, which is endemic in this part of the world and resulting in wars. I met children whose futures have been shattered overnight following the death of one of their parents, by the need to flee their villages as rebel groups advanced. Children involved with armed groups or child soldiers are not all combatants. The youngest are assigned to such duties as collecting wood, preparing meals, managing supplies, or crossing enemy lines to act as spies. Young girls, because armed groups also recruit little girls, are particularly vulnerable, as you might imagine. And these children are also taught to kill. Many of them are undocumented, known as ghost children. Their time on earth leaves behind no statistics, no official trace. The suffering endured by these children is, however, very real and is something I was able to observe and share with them during my visit. At my initiative, AMAD is therefore contributing to the efforts of various stakeholders, primarily UNICEF, MONUSCO, and the ICRC, to prevent these vulnerable children from becoming enlisted in armed groups and to support the demobilization and reintegration of these young people. The international community estimates that there are 300,000 children involved with armed groups throughout the world. In fact, it is highly likely that the actual number of children reduced to serving the interests of rebel chiefs and other warlords is much higher, since it is difficult to obtain any statistics in this area. It would be wrong to believe that this phenomenon is unique to Africa. It is also an issue in Asia and South America. AMAD seeks to be innovative in its approach to the demobilization and reintegration of child soldiers. With the support of the Brazilian ambassador in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have used capoeira as a means of re-socializing these children of broken dreams. In this dance, martial art, which originated in Africa, based on the peaceful combat practiced by captive slaves, there is no contact, there are no winners, no losers. In some ways, the central notion in capoeira is that the other is not your opponent, but your mirror. The results of this project, which was begun 3 years ago, are extremely convincing. The practice of capoeira taught by Brazilian masters as part of the long process of demobilization and reintegration carried out in transit and orientation centers managed by UNICEF and in partnership with local NGOs, thus makes an active contribution to the psychosocial process of reintegrating these children. Thanks to capoeira, they have been able to reclaim ownership of their bodies, which often retain the scars of the suffering they have endured, to gain control over their impulses, and to respect their opponents. In capoeira, as I said, there are no winners or losers, and the boys dance with the girls. The rueda, a circle made up of capoeiristas, rebuilds the spirit of community which dominated prior to the emergence of armed groups. During my visit, it was a great pleasure to attend a ceremony of the first 200 young people who had benefited from this initiative. These children, all dressed in white and given a new nickname, were able to reintegrate into society, and particularly with their families. I witnessed these deserving children rediscover their innocence, a new identity, a family, and hope for a better life. This is important because it illustrates how a cultural tradition from a country thousands of miles away can help to rebuild a being and achieve his own personal reconciliation. I was moved by this event, but was also touched by the accounts I heard from other younger children, left to fend for themselves. They told me that without any real hope for the future, without access to education, they were considering joining the local rebel chief, the only adult figure able to guarantee them a daily meal and a little security. A small boy who was barely 6 or 7 confided to me that he knew it wasn't a good idea for him, but that he had no other choice. As part of this visit, I went to the Mungote camp for internally displaced persons in North Kivu. It is now 15 years since these people were first displaced. Of the 6,000 children living in the camp, only just about 600 are receiving an education in the school close to the nearest village, where the teachers have not been paid for over 2 years. The others, left to idle, were mostly playing war games. Under such conditions, without finding the resources needed to educate these children, how can we put an end to the disastrous vicious circle? I welcome the commitments undertaken by the international community to combat this phenomenon, which is violating the principles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and particularly the Paris Declaration, day after day. But beyond these commitments, how can this process be halted without returning hope and dignity, guaranteeing them, at the very least, a high-quality education, which would enable them to extricate themselves from the benevolent yoke of these warlords? These are extreme cases, but we are reminded that every child deserves an education, especially those who cannot afford it, those who, without it, are a lost generation. It is time to rethink how we educate our children, not only in devastated societies, but also in our own more comfortable ones. The principles we apply and the tools we use in war-torn areas can and should be applied in other safer zones. For instance, orientation in a new context, reacquiring space and dignity, stimulating coping resources, reactivating a life project, helping in identifying skills. This is the path to social and cultural integration. But the biggest obstacle is anger. But isn't anger noble when society is corrupt and brutal? When people are kept down, they all too often learn resignation towards their fate. They form adaptive preferences, defining their lot as acceptable. In doing so, change is unlikely. Awakening people to the injustice of society's treatment of them is a necessary first step towards social progress. But in order to go further, we must focus a lot of our attention on the issue of trust as a necessary part of the stability, hence the legitimacy of any society. In situations of profound oppression and systematic injustice, trust is non-existent. It is very easy for victims to believe that trust is impossible and that they can overcome by dominating in their turn, or perhaps by establishing a grudging modus vivendi in which each side defends itself from incursions by the other. Our mission at AMAD is to build trust, express shared values, and then moving on beyond anger and forgiveness, forge attitudes that actually support trust and reconciliation. What values promise such support? Generosity, justice, and truth. In human relations, we are always wrong to neglect the future. It is the only thing we can change, and it is, in effect, the only life we have. Thank you for your time.
Fin.
Moi, j'ai 16 ans. À la groupe armée, j'étais entrée à l'âge de 14. Quand j'étais à l'âge de 15 ans et demi, moi, j'étais devenue comme un enfant de la rue. Oui, parce que mon père il était décédé quand j'étais à l'âge de 12 ans. Mon père m'a pris, il m'a pris à la main de ma mère quand j'étais à l'âge de 10 ans. On était parti avec mon père là-bas à Kisangani, à la province de Rwanda.
J'étais au groupe armé de APCLS. APCLS se trouve au territoire de Massissi et celui qui est le général, c'est Houndé. Général, c'est Houndé vraiment, c'est là où j'étais.
En prison, c'était un contrefacteur qu'il m'a pris là-bas à Kisangani pour aller à Nitoré. En prison, j'ai fait à la main de ces contrefacteurs 10 ans. Et quand j'étais là, on était arrêté ces contrefacteurs. En prison, il est condamné. Donc, quand j'étais là à Nitori, c'était une personne, un groupe d'armées, les ADF NAL. M'a pris, il était appelé moi avec mes amis. Nous étions au nombre de 12 personnes. C'était le 25 décembre 2015.
Kisha mama akitutupa munyumba na tuko watoto watatu. Kisha njoo watoto walikuwa ninyang'anya, kisha na mimi nikaenda Munyaturu. Ile siku watoto walinichokozaka, nikiwapiga nikatoroka. Watoto wa komanda.
On m'a pris en force. Donc ce n'est pas ma volonté qui m'a volonté d'y aller. Mais on m'a pris. Donc on nous a appelé que mon grand frère est malade. D'y aller là où mon grand frère est, on nous a pris là. Donc on nous a menti. Pour quitter là, c'est difficile. C'est très difficile vraiment. Parce que si tu fuis, on te trappe là où tu es fui.
Tu as fui?
Là vraiment, on peut te tuer.
Ceci, on l'appelle une signe d'adi.
une famille à la capoeira. Dans la capoeira, il y a la paix à la capoeira. Aussi dans la capoeira, il y a aussi des amis dans la capoeira.
J'aime l'amitié. Il y a l'amitié là à la capoeira. Même si vous êtes obligé à ne pas combattre, c'est léger, mais ce n'est pas une guerre. Et vraiment, là, nous sommes contents au capoeira.